they come from different states, states where unemployment is high and people are looking for jobs and looking for alternatives. And I would just like to turn to the senator from the great state of Missouri, Senator Blunt, and ask the senator from Missouri if he has a view. Is he hearing from his constituents in Missouri?
I do, and I think I'm going to go quickly to my good friend from Ohio who has to leave in a minute and come back. But I just met with disabled veterans who are here in town today, and I told them I was going to be talking about energy, and they said, well, you know, we're really just the long-term effort of the Veterans Administration to get veterans to their health care appointments is dramatically impacted by these high gas prices, just like what veterans and retirees of all kinds were going to do with the number that went into their the number of dollars that went into their gas tank. As they see that gas tank go to $10 and maybe they decide I'm going to have to quit because that's all the money I've got with me, or I'm going to fill up the tank and see it go 40, 50, 60. As families look at that, as retirees look at that, as veterans look at that, they've got to be thinking as that gas tank number changes, something else they were going to do that week is something that they're not going to be able to do. This has dramatic impact on families. It has dramatic impact on the way we live. It has dramatic impact on the confidence people have in our economy. If you look at any charts of gas prices going up, you see consumer confidence going down. It happens in states like yours or in states in the middle of the country like Missouri or Senator Portman's state of Ohio. And, Senator, have you got some – I know we've all been home. I'm sure you can't have been home and not have heard a lot about gas prices.
You're absolutely right. To my colleagues from Texas and Missouri, they are right on in terms of the impact of this on Ohio families. I have been home last week, and in fact, I just drove from Ohio to Washington last night and had to fill up a couple of times on the way, and the price was over $3.70 a gallon. And according to AAA, that's, you know, the average price now is over $3.70 a gallon. This is impacting families. I met with people who are in the trucking business, some small operators who are trying to make ends meet, and they're saying, Rob, I don't know how this is going to work because our gas prices keep going up at the time when our expenses are going up as well, and they're really getting squeezed out. And, of course, higher prices for gas affect all of us as families, but also affects everything that we buy because that cost is embedded there. So this is hurting our economy in very fundamental ways. Record levels for this time of year, and this is not just a seasonal issue. This is a longer-term failure of an energy policy by the Obama administration, and that's something that we all need to focus on, not to just be critical of bad policies that have gotten us here, but how do we get out of it? What do we do? And that's what I'd like to talk about for a minute today. Let me give you a couple interesting numbers. The price of gas has increased by 94% in the last 3.5 years during the Obama administration. So you're talking about almost 100% increase in the cost of gasoline. All-time high last year, $3.53 a gallon, and again over $3.70 this year already. By the way, last year, the average amount spent by a family in America for gasoline at the pump, over $4,000. So this is a big part of people's budgets. We've been hit hard, and at a time when millions of Americans are struggling amid a continuing weak economy, it's particularly tough because budgets are already stretched thin. We need to produce more, in my view. And if you produce more, you're going to see prices come down. And it's sort of the basic laws of supply and demand. So right now we have demand around the world maybe picking up a little bit, and yet we are not producing as much as we should be. And frankly, we're producing less than we have been. Let me give you some interesting numbers here that actually surprised me in terms of what the President's saying versus the facts. The President says we're producing more than we have in the past. Decline in production of natural gas on public lands and waters went down 11% last year. Decline of oil production, 14%. In the Gulf of Mexico, there was a 17% drop from 618 million barrels in 2010 to 514 in 2011. Senator from Texas talked about this. We're not seeing an increase. We're seeing a decrease. And this is at a time when all of us, I hope, realize that we've got to be focused on producing more here at home, one, so we can get prices down, and two, so that we can get less dependent on these dangerous and volatile parts of the world. And if we don't do that, we're going to be subject to what happens in Libya or what happens in Iran and see gas prices spike up as we're seeing now. We've got to produce more, and we've got to produce it here at home to get away from the OPEC cartel. Washington wastes time by not acting now to immediately expand that production. And White House talks, well, says you can't immediately expand production because it takes some time. Well, all the more reason to get started with it. As the senator from Texas has said, if we had started on this a few years ago, we'd be in much better shape. But also, the price of gasoline, of course, reflects what people think it's going to be in the future. So even if we made a commitment today to get busy on more domestic production of oil and natural gas, it would affect the price because it would affect what folks are thinking about what the future prices are going to be.
Would the senator from Ohio yield? Because
Senator from Texas.
Absolutely.
I think that the senator from Ohio is making such a good point, because here the president is saying just producing more won't lower prices. Does that seem like the fundamental supply and demand economic explanation that most economists have adopted in our country, that if you supply more, that the price will go down? Doesn't that seem like a non sequitur?
It does, and I think most people get it, because even if you don't have a degree in economics, and I don't, you understand that the laws of supply and demand work. So if you're going to cut the supply, as has happened, you're going to see prices go up. And let me give you an example of this. In 2010, the president canceled leases in the Gulf of Mexico, Mid-Atlantic. In 2011, put forward a new 5-year lease plan that reinstitutes a moratorium in the Atlantic Pacific, halves the number of lease sales in the old plan. So again, the supply is going down. You're likely to see prices go up. That's exactly what's happened. He slowed down permits for deep water and shallow water drilling in the Gulf. He is now set to impose severe new regulations on oil refiners. It's going to further raise prices. If you look at oil refineries, that's a big part of the cost of gasoline. And so about 11% of the cost, according to the American Petroleum Institute, of the price of gasoline comes from refining. And by putting more and more regulations and costs on refining, you're going to have an impact on price as well that's negative and hurting our families. The EPA, the cap-and-trade regime didn't get through the Congress, and so they're moving ahead with it with regulations, causing a lot of uncertainty, lack of construction of refineries. The first new refinery in a generation, in fact, has been delayed because of it, which actually brings us to the second problem, to my colleagues from Missouri and Texas. This is not just about gas prices, as important as that is, it's about jobs. Because by stopping the construction of a refinery or putting new regulations on, not allowing the kind of drilling that we want to do in the state of Ohio to bring jobs, you're hurting the very jobs that Americans need to be able to pay for their gas bills. Now, these are good-paying jobs. They tend to be jobs that pay well, have good benefits. And so a pro-growth energy strategy doesn't just result in a more secure energy source and more reliable energy. It also results in more jobs, which we need desperately. The president seems to be saying that he's going to reverse course. In his State of the Union address, he says he's for an all-of-the-above strategy. By the way, a week after that, you know what he did? He rejected the Keystone XL pipeline, which, talk about all of the above. We certainly should be, from our strong ally to the north, getting oil we need for our refineries to get the cost down. And by the way, that pipeline also picks up American oil. I bet you that our colleague from North Dakota is going to talk about that in a little while, because he has been governor of North Dakota, understands the importance of the Keystone XL pipeline. So whether it's the offshore drilling we talked about, moving ahead with drilling onshore and exploration that can help create jobs and energy security, whether it's the Keystone XL pipeline, whether it's what I talked about in terms of the regulations on our refineries, there are things that we can and should do, and do immediately. And if we do these things to have more domestic energy production, yes, we will begin to see these prices go down and stabilize. I come from Ohio, as Senator from Missouri said, and we have a tradition of producing oil and gas. It goes back to the turn of the century, the last century. Then we kind of got away from it for a while, and people like my colleague from Texas here started producing a lot more oil and gas. We're back in the business, thanks to these shale finds. And it's the Marcellus shale, it's the Utica shale, it's natural gas, but it's also oil and what they call wet gas, which is very valuable. I would tell you, having spent a lot of time in eastern Ohio over the last several days, people are really excited about this. It's bringing back jobs, good-paying jobs, allowing people to stay in these communities and be able to raise their families with not just a living wage, but real hope for the future. And it also will have an effect on our gas prices. We have an opportunity here, before things get worse, to come up with a different solution, a sensible national energy policy that stops our dangerous dependency on foreign oil and leads to more domestic production, and therefore prices we can afford at the pump.
I just want to say to the senator from Ohio that I am very pleased that Ohio is getting back into the drilling business. That's creating jobs in a state that I know has had high unemployment. And it's just so clearly in America's best interest to have our people working. And, of course, the Keystone Pipeline, which our colleague from North Dakota is going to talk about in just a few minutes, is the perfect place to create jobs, instant jobs with not one dime of taxpayer dollars. This would be private dollars invested in a pipeline that would bring oil from our friends in Canada all the way through the United States to the refineries in Texas, which it is estimated would produce 830,000 barrels of oil and into gasoline a day. A day. Think of what that would do to the price. Now, I'm going to ask my friend and colleague from Missouri. The Secretary of Energy has actually made the statement that we want gasoline prices to increase along the lines of Europe. Oh, really? So I would just like to ask my friend from Missouri, how would the working people in your state feel about $8 or $9 per gallon, which is what they pay in Europe, as a cost at the pump? What would that do to the economy of Missouri? What would that do to the unemployment in Missouri?
Well, you know, I was asked the other day when I was home, does the administration have a plan? And I said, well, if you listen to what they say, this is their plan, for these gas prices to go up. And we're not Europe, in spite of what the Secretary of Energy may have said the month before he was named as Secretary, that our big problem was that our gas wasn't as high as gasoline in Europe. That was, according to him, our big problem. Now, the president who appointed him said just a few weeks before that at the San Francisco Chronicle editorial board, he said, of course, under my energy policies, energy prices will skyrocket. And so apparently they're well along the way on the plan. As we've mentioned a couple of times already, gasoline twice as high as it was in January of 2009. You know, we're not Europe. We're a big country that is dependent on transportation. We drive to go to work longer than most Europeans do. We transport our goods more than most Europeans do. We have this big agricultural economy that feeds a whole lot of the world and only really works with affordable energy. And 2 points that both you and the senator from Ohio have made that I'd like to drive home. One is that more American jobs mean more American energy means more American jobs. And not just the jobs to build something like the Keystone Pipeline, but also the jobs at the refinery when that 800,000 barrels of oil a day gets to our refinery. There are American workers running that refinery. And if our economy's prosperous, there are more people working in manufacturing and transportation and all the things that we do for a living. And the shortest path to more American jobs is more American energy, and we should be working on that. And then the impact on families. You know, as families see what's happening at the gas pump, as I said earlier, they just give up on other things that they would hope to do. The President said at the State of the Union message that he was for an all-of-the-above strategy. Now, apparently the regulators don't know about this. The regulators that the President have appointed seem to have no clue that the all-of-the-above strategy of coal, of natural gas, of oil needs to be part of what we're doing as we invest in the future. Nobody is opposed to looking for what comes next after fossil fuel. The concern is we're not there. And even if we knew we were going there, Mr. President, we wouldn't get there for a long time. Even if we knew what would power our cars 30 years from now, most cars 20 or 25 years from now would still be pulling up to a gas pump. Most trucks would still be pulling up to a gas pump. We frankly probably couldn't, the economy couldn't absorb it any other way. And we don't know yet what is the likely next thing. I'm for seeing us invest in that. I'm for conservation, so we use our energy more wisely. But let me just say, the poorest people are the people, they're the last ones that get the new high-mileage vehicle or the energy-efficient refrigerator or the new windows. Retired Americans, Americans struggling to get by, are going to be the last people to benefit in most cases from those ideas. Well, let's just conserve our way out of this, or let's price our way out of this. More American energy is good for us. Energy from our next-door neighbor is the next best thing to what is energy that we produce ourselves, and we ought to be doing all we can to produce all the competitive energy we can on our own. We then ought to be doing all we can to encourage our closest trading partner, our most equitable trading partner. When we send them $1, they send us almost $1 back every single time. And energy security. The odds that we're going to have a problem with our Canadian neighbor are a whole lot less than the odds that something's going to happen in the Middle East that's a problem for us. We can become, because of these new finds in oil shale and gas shale, and tar sands and other things, we can, and the small platforms we can now use to access oil that we wouldn't want to disrupt in a significant way, but a small drilling platform doesn't do that. And, you know, I thank our good friend Senator Hutchinson from Texas for putting this together and being this discussion today and being such a leader on these energy issues. But Senator Hoeven, when he was Governor Hoeven, saw exactly what can happen in the economy of a state when you decide you're going to make the most of your natural resources. And the economy of North Dakota changed dramatically while he was governor because it became an energy producer and now one of the biggest energy producers in our country. And I know he wants to talk about the Keystone Pipeline, and I want to hear him talk about that. But if you're ready, Senator, let me go back to you, and then we'll hear more, I'm sure, from Governor Hoeven, Senator Hoeven, about the Keystone Pipeline.
Well, I want to thank the senator from Missouri because I think the point you made about trading with Canada, our closest neighbor, our biggest trading partner, as opposed to having Canada ship their oil that they're now producing in the Alberta sands over to China or over someplace else, and sometimes it would be shipped back in, or we would be taking oil from the Middle East, and all of the things that can happen when oil is being shipped from the Middle East to America are risks that we would have to take. It doesn't make sense.
Can I make one final point on that? You know, every other country in the world looks at its natural resources, and the first two words they think of are economic advantage or economic opportunity. And that's what the Canadians are doing. Only in the United States do you have any significant number of leaders who look at our natural resources and the first two words they think of are environmental hazard. What's the worst thing that could happen, and what would happen if that happened every day? And the Canadians, you know, their prime minister was in China within the last month talking about selling their oil to the Chinese who want to buy it. And that's what the Canadians should be doing. They would prefer to sell it to us. We should buy it. But they're not going to just decide, well, if our most logical partner doesn't want it, we'll just let our economy suffer and not do anything with it. Nobody else looks at its energy resources that way. We shouldn't either. We shouldn't expect the Canadians to. That pipeline is going to go either south to our refineries or west to the coast that will then ship all of that oil to Asia. And we shouldn't let that happen. They don't want it to happen, but we shouldn't be upset with them if we won't buy it and they decide that they're going to benefit from their own resources as they should.
The senator from Missouri is making the exact right point. Of course they should look for markets so that their people can be employed. The folly is that America wouldn't be the logical place to say, yes, we want it. Of course. And let me just give you a statistic, because I want to ask the senator from North Dakota his opinion, because, frankly, he has been the leader in the United States Senate to try to get the Keystone Pipeline approved by the State Department and the White House. He's been the leader. And I was amazed just yesterday that the White House did a kind of a double backflip with a twist. And the Wall Street Journal said it best, Obama's Keystone Jiu-Jitsu. And what the administration did in a mind-numbing kind of logic was say, well, you know, we said no after 4 years of environmental studies that all approved the Keystone Pipeline coming from Canada down through Oklahoma and into the refineries in Texas. Instead of approving that after 4 years of good environmental studies that came out positive, the President said no. But yesterday, the President said, well, we'll approve and say it's really a good idea to do the pipeline from Oklahoma down to Texas. Well, you know, that's not bad. It's great to have that. But the problem is, if you do the 830,000 barrels a day that would come from Canada all the way down to the refineries in Texas, it would produce 34 million gallons of gasoline a day. 34 million. Now, I would just ask the senator from North Dakota, who would be bypassed with this new plan, how is that going to affect the rest of America? Not the America between Oklahoma and Texas, but the rest of America, including the state of North Dakota. And why would he think that the President would think that is a solution? So, Mr. President, I would just ask the senator from North Dakota, and I would like to make sure that the senator from North Dakota has up to 10 minutes. Could I ask unanimous consent?
Without objection. There's 5 minutes left now, so you want an additional 5.
That would be fine. I will just turn it over to the senator then from North Dakota for up to 10 minutes and just ask him the question, how on earth could this affect the price of gasoline when we could be putting 34 million gallons of gasoline a day into people's tanks? How could the President say that won't lower the price? How could he say it?
Exactly. I'd like to thank the esteemed senator from Texas both for organizing this colloquy with the esteemed senator from Missouri and the senator from Ohio on this very, very important issue. We have our American consumers paying more than $3.70 at the pump today. I think today the actual price is $3.72. So that's exactly the right question, because that hits every single American, every single one. And as you and the other senators have pointed out, when the administration took office, the price of gasoline, the price of a gallon of gasoline at the pump was about $1.85. Today it's $3.70. Actually, this chart we made yesterday, it's already old. Today the average price in the United States is $3.72. And, of course, in some places it's already well over $4. The projection is that by Memorial Day, gasoline will be $4 a gallon, and by later this summer it could be as much as $5 a gallon. So let's put that into perspective for just a minute, following up on the question put forward by the senator from Texas. Recently, the President wanted a payroll tax cut, and the Congress passed that payroll tax cut. As the administration, as the President liked to point out, that was about $1,000 a year. The benefit of that payroll tax cut averaged about $1,000 a year for the American worker. or about $40 a paycheck, right? You get a paycheck every 2 weeks, so $40 a paycheck for the average working American. That's about $20 a week. Now, when you're paying somewhere between $4 and $5 a gallon for gas at the pump, you more than pay that additional $20 you got in that payroll tax, don't you? In other words, it costs you more than that. So in essence, you've gone back because of the high price of gasoline. So what's the administration doing? Well, as the senator from Missouri just pointed out, the administration has an all-of-the-above strategy. What is that? That means we produce more energy from all our resources, from oil, from gas, from biofuels, from solar, from wind, from nuclear, from biomass. And I agree with that. We should produce all of our energy resources and all of the above strategy. The problem is the administration is saying that, but they're not doing it. I repeat, they're saying an all of the above strategy, but they're not doing it. And not only are they not doing it, they're actually blocking oil and gas development in our country, and they're blocking our ability to get oil from our closest ally, Canada. And the Keystone XL pipeline, which they've turned down, is a great example of just that. 830,000 barrels a day that we're not getting from Canada because after more than 3.5 years of study, the administration has turned down the project. But the Keystone XL pipeline and projects like it are very important parts of the solution. We still get 30% of our crude from the Middle East, Venezuela. Oil prices are going up because of instability in the Middle East. That creates a risk premium to the price of gasoline, which we could reduce substantially by producing more oil and gas here at home and with our closest friend and ally and trading partner, Canada. So ironically, the President wanted a payroll tax cut. He said to stimulate our economy and to help the American worker, but then he more than takes away any benefit from that payroll tax cut by blocking our ability to develop oil and gas in this country and our ability to get oil from Canada. So in my home state of North Dakota, not only can we not get our oil to market because we can't put it in the Keystone XL pipeline and get it to the refineries, we can't get that oil from Canada either. Our consumers, working Americans, pay the price at the pump. Well, why would the administration do that? Why would they do something like that? Well, I think some insight is provided by Ted Turner's letter on the CNN website. Ted Turner has a letter on the CNN website right now. You can go check it out. Mr. Turner cites a number of arguments as to why we should not get oil from Canada. First, he says, well, that oil that we get from Canada, we'll just export it, so it won't reduce gas prices in the United States. But a recent Department of Energy report dated June 22, 2011, U.S. Department of Energy report says just the opposite. It says that the crude we bring in from Canada will be refined in the United States and that it will lower gas prices in the United States on the East Coast, on the Gulf Coast, and in the Midwest. Not may reduce gas prices, will reduce gas prices East Coast, Gulf Coast, and the Midwest. Well, then Mr. Turner's letter says, well, the pipeline will leak. And, gee, we don't want a pipeline that leaks. Yet, as my second chart shows here, this is the second Keystone pipeline. This first Keystone pipeline's already been built. And you said, well, that Keystone pipeline leaked, and so we can't build the second one because the first one leaked. Well, the first one had no underground leaks. The leaks he's referring to were some minor leaks in some of the joints as they constructed the thing, which is natural and normal, and they were quickly and readily handled, and they were no problem. That pipeline is functioning today. It's functioning just fine, and there are no underground leaks. So that's not accurate either, is it? And as a matter of fact, let's take a look. Geez, those aren't the only two pipelines we've got in the United States. Let's take a look. There's a few other pipelines. We have thousands of oil and gas pipelines across the country, but somehow building one more that brings in 830,000 barrels a day to help us reduce the price of gas is a problem? Really? Doesn't make much sense. Well, so then let's go on. The other argument he says is, well, we're producing that oil in Canada in the oil sands, and that's not good because we have to excavate to do it. Well, what's the reality with producing oil sands oil? It does have somewhat higher greenhouse gas emissions. How much? About 6%. 6%. That's how much more greenhouse gas emissions you get. But we're moving from excavating to produce that oil and gas to in situ. In situ is drilling, just like we do for conventional oil. That means same amount of greenhouse gas, same footprint. 80% of the new development is in situ, so it has the same footprint, same greenhouse gas emission as traditional drilling. We deploy these new technologies, we produce more energy, we do it with better environmental stewardship. So these arguments aren't accurate. But the reality is this. Folks like Mr. Turner, rich and famous, I guess they can pay $4 a gasoline, they can pay $5 a gasoline, they can pay a lot more. The problem isn't for them. The problem is for hard-working Americans who have to pay that price at the pump every single day. And so the administration has to decide. Who are they going to side with on this issue? Who are they going to side with on this issue? Are they going to continue to side with, I guess, rich and powerful interests that want to see those gasoline prices go higher and the price of gasoline at the pump really isn't an issue? Or with hard-working Americans for who this creates real hardship? And that's the issue we have here with this vote that we'll be having on the Keystone XL pipeline. The reality is this. We can't have North American energy security. We can do it. Right now, between Canada and the United States, with some help from Mexico, we produce about 70% of our crude. The Keystone XL project alone would take us up over 75%. And with other sources that some of my colleagues have referred to, like shale, like the in-situ drilling I talked about, we can easily meet our needs. And in fact, if we include the work we're doing with natural gas, with biofuels, and with energy efficiency, I believe we can truly have North American energy security, meaning supply our energy needs in the United States, in North America, with our friends in Canada within 5 to 7 years. But we've got to get started. We've got to get started. So let's get started, Mr. President. Let's start by approving the Keystone XL pipeline project. Let's show the world that we're serious about getting this done. Asking the Saudis for more oil, like some of my colleagues have done, that doesn't solve the problem. Or taking oil out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, that doesn't solve the problem. We solve the problem by truly producing all the above. Not saying it, but by doing it. It is ironic that the administration praises TransCanada for moving forward on building the only portion of this pipeline that they can build without a presidential permit. Praising them for moving forward at the very time they're blocking the project. And while they're blocking it, that means not one more drop of oil coming into this country for Canada, not one more drop of oil coming from my state of North Dakota down to the refineries to help reduce the price of gasoline at the pump. That's not an all-of-the-above energy policy. That's not helping American workers, and that is exactly why gasoline is $3.70 a gallon and going higher. It's time for Congress to act. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
Mr. President, first, let me express my disappointment that we are not here debating the surface transportation reauthorization bill. We had a bill that came out of the Environment and Public Works Committee, came out several others of our committees by unanimous vote. It's a bipartisan bill. It's a bill that will save jobs and create jobs here in America. It will reinvest in our own infrastructure to make America more competitive. And it's been done in a bipartisan manner, thanks to the hard work of many people. I see Senator Boxer's on the floor, her incredible leadership on it. and we have an agreed path forward from the point of view of the relevant amendments. So what is holding up the process? It's these amendments have absolutely nothing to do with the transportation programs of this country. We're talking about policy in Egypt, which should have nothing to do with our transportation needs here. So I just start by saying how disappointed I am that we haven't yet started the real debate on our transportation reauthorization bill, which will create jobs, save jobs, and modernize America and make us more competitive. And let me just yield for a moment, if I could, to my colleague from California, Senator Boxer.
If my friend would just yield for a question and keep the floor, and I would ask unanimous consent that this time for this colloquy not be taken off his time, or does he have unlimited time?
It's 10 minutes.
Let me just say thank you to my friend. I know he's here to talk about judges, which is a critical, critical issue, and I'm very happy that he's going to do that. The lack of action on these qualified nominees is hurting our people. But I just wanted to thank him for his comments. This Senator from Maryland, Senator Cardin, is a senior member of the Environment and Public Works Committee and worked so hard along with his staff, invaluable staff and invaluable contribution to the transportation bill. And I guess the question I'll get to is this one. With 2.8 million jobs on the line, that's 1.8 million jobs that we have currently attached to a highway bill, and then an additional million jobs, which will be created because of some of the work we did on TIFIA to leverage the funds. Does not my friend believe that this is the time to move a jobs bill when we are in the process of seeing this economy finally turn around? It's not as fast as we want. Doesn't my friend believe that the timing of this couldn't be better, and that if we pass this bill, which is so bipartisan, it will kick this economic recovery into higher gear?
Senator Boxer, you're absolutely correct. We need more jobs in America. I congratulate the Obama administration for turning our economy around. We've had 23 consecutive months of private sector job growth, but we don't have enough jobs yet. We've got to create more jobs. Now is the time to be bold on looking for responsible programs that can move this country forward in creating more jobs, not only initially in the road construction, bridge construction, transit construction, but make us more competitive for the future, creating permanent job growth for America, jobs that cannot be exported. That's what we should be doing, and that's why the surface transportation the bill is so important for us to bring up and debate and pass. And quite frankly, you have performed, I think, something that's unprecedented, not unprecedented, but unusual here. You've got bipartisan support from 3 committees. We're working now on the 4th. I mean, you've got all the committees together. It's time to move this bill forward for jobs for Americans.
And my very last question, if I can, through the chair. I hope that my friend is aware that right now the leadership is working very hard to take this very unwieldy list of amendments and get them down to some responsible list so that we can begin finally in earnest. I have to point out that I don't understand how my Republican friends think it's appropriate to add to a highway bill the issue of birth control. I don't know how my friends on the other side think it's appropriate to repeal environmental laws on this highway bill. I don't understand, as my friend from Maryland pointed out, how they can try to say they can see a connection between a highway bill and what's happening in Egypt. Now, we care about all these issues, and the Senate will address these issues. But we have a jobs bill, a bipartisan jobs bill, and I just want to end by thanking my friend for yielding to me. And I look forward to his remarks on judges, and I look forward to getting back to our transportation bill, which I'm hopeful will happen at some point today.
Well, let me thank Senator Boxer. And can I ask unanimous consent I can speak up to 10 minutes if in morning business?
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to urge the Senate to confirm Judge George Levi Russell III of Maryland to be a United States District Judge for the District of Maryland. Judge Russell was reported by a voice vote of the Judiciary Committee on February the 16th, as the presiding officer, the President of the Senate, knows. Judge Russell currently sits as a trial judge in the Baltimore City Circuit Court. I take the obligation very seriously in terms of the advice and consent role played by the Senate. I am concerned, Mr. President, that our judicial confirmation process here in the Senate has broken down due to partisanship, particularly for non-controversial judges. Judge Russell's nomination now joins a long list of backlogged, non-controversial judicial nominations that are stuck on the Senate floor. As of yesterday, the Senate calendar contained 20 judicial nominations approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee, still awaiting final vote. 15 of these nominees have been pending since last year, and 18 of them have received strong bipartisan support from the Senate Judiciary Committee. These are non-controversial nominees that are due the up or down vote on the floor of the United States Senate, and there is no justification for the delay of the Senate carrying out its constitutional responsibility. The Senate is therefore responsible for a rising vacancy rate in our nation's Article III courts. The real victim here is not only the nominee and their family that are awaiting final Senate action. The real victim is the American people, who face increasing delays in courts that are overburdened and understaffed. A higher vacancy rate means that the lack of timely hearings and decisions by our federal courts, affecting our citizens' ability to have access to justice and a fair and impartial resolution of their complaints. In Maryland, we are trying to fill a vacancy that was created during the end of President Bush's term of office, when Judge Peter Massetti took senior status in 2008. So this vacancy has been there for a long time. It's time for us to act. Judge Russell is an excellent candidate, received bipartisan support in the Judiciary Committee, and is ready to take office upon being confirmed by the Senate. The time for action is now. Judge Russell brings a wealth of experience to this position at both state and federal courts. Earlier in his career, he served as a federal prosecutor and as an attorney in a private law firm. He now sits as a state court trial judge in Maryland. He has the experience. Judge Russell graduated from Morehouse College with a B.A. in political science in 1988 and a J.D. from Maryland Law School in 1991. He passed the bar examination and was admitted to practice in Maryland in 1991. He then clerked for Chief Judge Robert Bell of the Maryland Court of Appeals. That's our state's highest court. He worked as a litigation assistant for 2 years at Hazel Thomas and then briefly at Whiteford Taylor. He then served as an assistant U.S. attorney for the District of Maryland from 1994 to 1999, handling civil cases. In that capacity, he represented various federal government agencies in discrimination, accident, and medical malpractice cases. He then worked as an associate at the Peter Angelos law firm for 2 years. In 2002, he went back to the U.S. Attorney's Office handling criminal cases until 2007. He represented the United States in the criminal prosecution of violent crimes and narcotics cases during the investigative stage, at trial, and on appeal. This included the initiation and monitoring of wiretaps to infiltrate and break up violent gang issues in Baltimore City. He also served as the Project Safe Neighborhood Coordinator for the office from 2002 until 2005. He participated in community outreach programs, including attending community meetings on behalf of the office and attended meetings with the Baltimore State's Attorney's Office to reduce violent crime in Baltimore neighborhoods. Now, Mr. President, in 2007, January 2007, Governor Ehrlich, as I'm sure you all are aware, the Republican governor of our state, appointed him to serve as an associate judge of the Baltimore City Circuit Court for a term of 15 years. As a trial judge, Judge Russell has presided over hundreds of trials that have gone to verdict or judgment and has the experience in handling jury trials, bench trials, civil cases, and criminal cases. He has the experience, the professional experience, which has been recognized by a Republican governor and a Democratic president. He should be voted on the floor of this body, and he should be confirmed. Judge Russell has strong roots, legal experience, and community involvement in the state of Maryland. He was born and raised in Baltimore City and has an extended family who live in Baltimore. He serves as a director and trustee on the board of the Enoch Pratt Free Library, which serves the disadvantaged throughout the state of Maryland. He served on the board of directors of the Community Law Center, which is an organization designed to help neighborhood organizations improve the quality of life for their residents. He is a community activist as well as his professional experience. He's also served as a board member of several organizations that devoted substantial resources to helping the disadvantaged, including Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Maryland. I know that he has often spoken to young people in schools about the obligation, duty, and mandate of a judge and tries to demystify the role of a judge in a black robe. Judge Russell is particularly concerned with addressing the drug violence and mental health problems that plague Baltimore City. Mr. President, the reason I went through all of his qualifications right now, even though his nomination is not pending, is that we got to put a face on the people who are being denied the opportunity for an up or down vote on the floor of the United States Senate. You hear the numbers. I mentioned them, 20, backed up. That's a large number when you look at the vacancy rates on our courts. When you look at this vacancy that's been pending now for the people of Maryland for 3 years, they have a right for action on the floor of the Senate. They have a right to have these nominees heard in regular order. But I want the people to know about this one individual and how qualified he is to assume the position on the District Court of Maryland. I just would urge my colleagues to do everything they can to let's carry out our responsibility. I am absolutely confident that Judge Russell possesses the qualifications, temperament, and passion for justice that will make him an outstanding United States District Court judge for the District of Maryland. He will serve the people of Maryland very well in this position. I therefore urge my colleagues not only to allow us to vote on Judge Russell's confirmation, but let us vote on the 20 nominees that have been reported out of the Judiciary Committee and show the American people that we are ready to carry out our responsibilities. I ask my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, my Republican friends, it's time, way past time, for us to carry out our responsibility. Stop putting filibusters or holds on these judicial nominations. Let's vote on them and carry out our responsibilities as United States Senators. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, recently I came to the floor of the Senate to talk about the lack of faith that the American people have in the political system and in our government. My focus that day was on campaign finance laws and the impact of the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court 2 years ago. Today I'm here to discuss, along with my colleagues, another dynamic of Capitol Hill that is making people lose faith in Washington, the apparent inability of Congress to get routine business done, specifically the failure of the Senate to fill the dozens of judicial vacancies that exist around the country. This doesn't need to be a partisan debate. I know senators on each side have their own reasons why it's the other party's fault, but we need to just put those arguments behind us and agree to do the people's business. We've actually done a good job, as Senator Cardin has pointed out, on the Judiciary Committee with having a number of judges that have come through that committee and are waiting approval on the floor. But often we approve judges and then they don't get floor votes for months and months and months. Also, the vast majority of judges that get approved unanimously in committee. That was my experience with the judge that I recommended for Minnesota, who now is a judge. So we got her done, but there are so many more, as you know, and so many jurisdictions with heavy caseloads which are awaiting judges. Once these judges get to the floor, almost all of them just get a handful of no votes. Why is that? They've been vetted. Their records have been looked at. They've gone through a committee hearing. They've been looked at senators on both sides of the aisle in the Judiciary Committee. And if they've reached that point of being on the floor of the Senate, it's no surprise that they might get just a few no votes. So I don't see this as a partisan issue, but it's an issue that we must get done. If almost all the senators support almost all the judges, this isn't just about pushing one side agenda or judicial philosophy. These are extremely qualified judges who senators believe will be fair, impartial jurists committed to objectively interpreting the law. But the fact that we are lagging way behind in the confirmation pace under previous presidents of both parties and with the Senate controlled by either party. By this time in the presidency of Bill Clinton, the Senate had confirmed 183 judges. By this time in the presidency of George W. Bush, the Senate had confirmed 170 judges. And yet, as of today, we have only confirmed 129 judicial nominees of President Obama. And it's important to note that President Bush actually ended up getting 5 more judges approved in his first term than President Clinton. So we don't have a case where there's suddenly been a decline over time with the judges' approval. In fact, it went up after Clinton, and now, as we can see, it's going down. Doesn't seem to be any indication at this very moment in time that we are speeding up the process. While earlier in the year we did confirm a number of judges, there was an agreement, there are still way too many out there and we need to move on them now. Typically, the Senate will approve non-controversial judicial nominees before the end of the session in December. But that did not happen this past year, and we have not made too much progress since returning in January. It doesn't take too long to approve a judge on the floor. Often we have an hour or two of debate and then vote on 2 or 3 judges. So we can get these judges confirmed quickly if both sides consent. Some people listening are probably thinking there must be an explanation, that I'm somehow leaving out key numbers when I've just explained we only need an hour or 2 for each of these 20-some pending judges. Maybe they're thinking there aren't as many vacancies as under previous presidents. But no, under President Clinton there were about 53 vacancies at this point in his presidency. Under President Bush there were 46 vacancies. Right now, under President Obama, there are in fact 85 judicial vacancies. Maybe people at home are thinking the slow process is a result of controversial nominees. But no, it's not that either. As I mentioned earlier, most of the judicial nominees awaiting a floor vote were approved unanimously by the Senate Judiciary Committee. That is not a committee, as the President knows from serving on that committee, that is for shrinking violets. There are people with very diverse views, and most of these nominees, as I explained, came through with all of their support. In fact, 16 of the 19 nominees waiting for a floor vote received unanimous votes in committee. They were approved by every single member of the Judiciary Committee from both parties. Most of those unanimous judges have been waiting for a vote for months. We should confirm them right away. We should confirm them this week. We can have a vote so the few people on the other side of the aisle who do not agree with those nominees can register their objections and vote no. But there is no reason to hold up all of these nominees for all of these jurisdictions across the country. For the judges that have come out of committee more recently, I understand that senators need time to look at their records and qualifications. That is an important part of the process. But after a reasonable period of time, let's move on to confirm the newer judges as well. Let's vote up or down on all of the judges and get them on the bench. I also want to point out that the judicial nomination process is bipartisan. That may surprise some people watching at home. They may think I'm making that up. But the truth is that nominees don't move forward in the Judiciary Committee unless both of the home state senators sign off. So whether it is 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans or 1 from either party, both senators have effective veto power over the judicial nominees from their state. And usually the judges are proposed by the President, first are recommended by senators. So it's not a question of President Obama just picking whoever he wants and appointing them to the judiciary. He has to pick people who are okay with both senators, regardless of party. It forces a president of either party to choose high-quality, well-respected mainstream judges. I remain hopeful that we can rectify this situation and start getting judges approved in a timely manner and catch up to where we were under previous presidents. But it is not about keeping some scorecard from president to president, as much as I've loved using these statistics today, Mr. President, or from Congress to Congress. In truth, it is about justice, and we all know that. We are constantly hearing complaints about the slow pace of federal courts. Those delays are real, and they impact people, real people, every day. Whether we are talking about people seeking to protect their rights under the Americans with Disability Act or companies trying to resolve commercial disputes, I have a few of them in my state, unreasonable delays in court proceedings undermine our system of justice. And things won't get any better if we understaff our federal judiciary. There are many problems facing our country that do not have simple solutions. There are many problems for which the 2 parties have vastly different solutions. But in this case, with judicial vacancies, there is only one solution, and it is well within our grasp given that so many of these judges were non-controversial. This is the solution, Mr. President. It's two words: let's vote. Let's vote on all of the pending nominees, and let's continue to vote as more nominees emerge from the Judiciary Committee. If a senator wants to vote no on a particular nominee, if he or she wants to give a long and glorious speech about why they are opposed to the nominee, please let them do that. Let them do that today. All we are asking for is a vote. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. Mr. President, I have eight.
Senator from Minnesota.
Mr. President, I have 8 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and the minority leaders. I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I note the absence of the quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akanga.
The Senate gavelled in this morning at 10 Eastern. It's been general speeches most of the morning, mostly focused on energy policy, some on judicial nominations. Senators will be holding their weekly policy lunches starting at about 12:30 Eastern. That'll last until 2:15. This afternoon, we are expecting more work on transportation programs and projects. Majority Leader Reid is hopeful that both sides can work out an agreement on amendments. Yesterday, he listed completing the surface transportation bill as one of the top 4 priorities in the Senate over the next 5 weeks, along with postal service overhaul legislation, a cybersecurity measure, and a number of judicial nominations. The House is in recess right now. On the agenda for the afternoon in the House is a bill to change regulation for for-profit colleges. The bill would eliminate minimum standards set by the Education Department. Votes in the House set for 6:30 Eastern. And of course, you can see the House live on C-SPAN when they gavel back in, and the Senate here on C-SPAN 2.
Ms. Ayotte.